Oh, it's recording and transcription. So, without further ado, it just remains for me to hand over to my colleague Rob, who is going to begin today's session. Thank you very much, Rob.
Thank you very much, Suze. Yeah, welcome everyone, and croeso. I'm Rob Pascoe, the data scientist at Data Cymru, and this is my beginner's guide to AI, the state of AI as of 2025. I'll be moving quite quickly through these points because it's very challenging to fit this into half of this session. And in the second half, as Suze mentioned, Paul from Powys will be talking about some real use of this stuff over in his council. I'd also like to thank Steve and Joe and David from the Welsh Gov Data Science team for helping to shape the slides, and they're also going to be milling around in the chat with you all today and potentially contributing to the Q&A at the end. Let's get to it. So I'll be covering here up to the last point where I'll be handing over for Paul to present. So over the course of what I have to say, you should be clear on what AI is and where it's come from, why it's important and what you need to think about when you're putting it into use. We'll also be covering maybe some myths, misconceptions and fears about AI, and some of these should be a little clearer to you by the end of today's session. So I thought I'd start off with kind of why the AI discussion is important. I mean, it's here and it's not going away. There's an awful lot of people maybe hyping it up too much, and a lot of valid criticism, but maybe some criticism that's too broad or heavy-handed. But I think it's worth bearing in mind the context of the kind of UK and Welsh Gov policy positions on this. Consecutive governments have held out AI to be crucial for economic growth, but also public sector productivity, and it's really seen, especially by Welsh government, as important to benefiting everyone in Wales, to benefiting citizens. To give a really quick intro of where this all came from, because it feels to some of us, I'm sure, like it's kind of popped up out of nowhere. It's been going on along. AI in one shape or another has been in universities for a while now. We've got a long history of academic computer scientists and statisticians. I think that's Dartmouth College in New Hampshire in that first picture, where the term AI was coined way back in 1955. I think if I skip over 2 bullet points here, the big thing that everyone's talking about at the minute is this generative AI, Microsoft Copilot, ChatGPT, and things like that, where it's become, I guess, a useful tool as a virtual assistant, and it's kind of popped up everywhere in a lot of people's lives. The thing I'd really like to get across here is that this is a development of older technology, which you may or may not have heard the term machine learning, which has been really developing strongly over the last 25 years. And you might recognize some of the example use cases there around self-driving cars, forecasting, image processing, and things like that. A thing that I'd draw attention to in this history here is that this isn't all happening within big corporations. They're certainly really good at it, but there's a strong open source community for these AI tools that is professional and hobbyist programmers developing these things and collaborating on them for free and making them available for free, which is, I think, some important context to where this has come from. To go into giving a bit of a definition of AI, I find this Turing Institute one really helpful, just as the kind of the base minimal level of information, making computers do things that require human intelligence is basically what we're talking about. But today we're mostly going to be talking about a kind of AI, as I say, called machine learning, which is about kind of imitating human ways of taking in information and learning from it. Some use cases there around, as on the previous slide, around perception, kind of facial recognition things, self-driving cars, but also prediction, like predicting vulnerability of cohorts in perhaps health and care or public protection and so on. So within this, there's this idea, a type of machine learning called large language models, which can understand and generate human language. And these are kind of the engine under the hood, under the bonnet of AI systems like Copilot, ChatGPT, and so on. So yeah, generative AI is the tool that we use, and large language models is the technology underneath. So you might hear me use both of those terms in the talk today. But in terms of use cases, they're things that can summarize documents for us, draft first drafts of things, act as virtual assistants, all while responding to plain English natural language inputs that we ask of it. So some fascinating technology there, but how does it work is useful, I think, in getting a footing in what exactly these tools are and how to think about them. So I'm going to work through some different examples of machine learning here, and I thought it best to start with the simplest one. Credit to Joe from the Welsh Gov data science team, because I've directly lifted this example from a presentation that he's done, where let's say we've got some information about the temperature and ice cream sales on a particular date. We can kind of examine what's going on there, but I think we're maybe all familiar with the idea of a line of best fit, which is, yeah, as I say, a very simple form of machine learning. And that imagine now that we have temperatures for dates in the future, we might be able to ask this model what the number of sales is likely to be on a future date or on multiple future dates. So I'm going to use this framing several times in quick succession here. What we do is we take a data set, temperatures and ice cream sales, we feed it into our model, which we train this model to understand about that data, and then we can make predictions, ask it about, let's say, dates in the future. It's worth commenting that machine learning can process very big and complex data sets. Maybe the data sets that would Excel line of best fit would really struggle with, and can tackle increasing complexity, as we'll see in these examples that I'll give. So the data that we put in and what model we're using, what exactly is in that diamond there, determines what it can do, and we can different bits of machine learning can cover really different tasks. So as I say, we'll really quickly move through some different examples of the same layout. Here we've got, rather than estimating a number of ice cream sales, we've got some information about let's say some buildings that we manage here, some properties, housing stock, and we've got a category for past data, whether these different kinds of buildings required work. So what we're doing is categorizing buildings that haven't had work perhaps into the the chance that they will need it. Another quick example is text analysis, natural language processing, or NLP is the term that you might hear kicking around. Let's say that rather than our IT providers doing this for us, we had a load of email text, and whether it was spam or whether it was meaningful, we could perhaps train one of these models on this text with a little bit of complexity that I won't cover about letting it understand that string of characters, that email. And then we can have an estimate on whether an email is likely to be spam that it hasn't seen before. And then a computer vision example. So processing images or videos from a self-driving car. We can tell it in those images where there are hazards or other road users or information that's useful for it to understand. We can train our model on that, and then it can recognize those things in an image that it hasn't seen before, perhaps in a live stream as it's driving down a road. So this is all of these examples are giving these estimates to us autonomously and without human intervention or the risk of human error. So to kind of quickly mention the strengths here, these tend to be excellent at very specific tasks, perhaps competing, or quite often competing with human people doing some of these monotonous and perhaps difficult tasks. But it has limitations, and it's important to weigh these up when deciding whether machine learning is useful or relevant to a particular job. A crucial thing here is garbage in, garbage out, and the amount and the quality of the information that goes into these things is crucial to how well they'll be able to do a job. So moving on to what is generative AI. We talked about types of machine learning that aren't this, and now to kind of quickly cover in the same pattern on the screen, the same flow diagram, what is exactly going on with generative AI. So to train, for example, Microsoft Copilot, developers or the engineers behind it will use millions of websites, books, reports, journals. We train a model here, as I mentioned, known as a large language model. And then this can be prompted to generate text for us. Very interestingly, rather than based on tables of data, based on prompts in plain English that we ask of it. I'm going to gloss over quite a lot of complexities here because of how little time we have. But it's helpful to think of these things as kind of statistical models that understand how language has been used in loads and loads of examples in those websites, books, and journals. So we can get an idea of that the simplest version of that statistical model by thinking about kind of your search engine like Google's autofill or your phone's predictive text. We might start with a sentence, how is there, and then prompt this generative AI to imagine what the next word is. And what it would be doing is having a statistical understanding of how it's seen the language used, and it might decide on the most likely next word. And then we could feed it in again after it said, how is the weather? And it might say, how's the weather today? So it's perhaps a useful distinction here that we're not talking about really human reasoning here necessarily as much as an understanding of, as I say, how language is used. So some examples of prompts. I think these are all from a recent version of ChatGPT for my personal account. So I could talk at length about all of these, but I'll kind of just highlight what is going on here and then not judge them or talk about how good it is at this point. We've got an example where we're asking it to summarize some new government digital service guidance for AI use in UK Gov, and say what's new in it. Secondly, we're prompting it about how we might implement a project plan to put this guidance into effect. And finally, we've asked it as a bit of fun to rewrite all of that guidance in the style of famous Welsh singer Tom Jones. Now, As I say, we'll talk about responsible AI a little bit in a minute, but it's important to say that all of these things should perhaps not be taken directly from an AI and used without a degree of caution, especially Tom Jones lyrics, but very much especially project plans shouldn't be taken from an AI and implemented without critical thought, I'd say. So yeah, in terms of strengths of this tech, we've got it understands, perhaps in air quotes, their language, and it can be flexible to requests that we really naturally ask it. And a crucial thing here is improving rapidly as the final bullet point there. I've got here a chart which is inspired by the Information is Beautiful website. It's showing the progression of these large language models. So on the x-axis here, we've got the date, the release date of different models. And on the y-axis there, we can see how well each model performed when tasked with answering a set of challenging expert level questions. So that's what MMLU means, with the higher the score there being, the better it performed. So you can see that part of the reason that every generative AI and LLMs are everywhere at the minute is because back at the end of 2022, we kind of caught up with human levels of competence in answering these kinds of questions. So we've kind of since then matched, air quotes again, human expert performance with some of these models up there. They reckon 89.8% is how human experts perform at these kinds of questions. One last thing to take away from this, I think, is that the Microsoft ones are green, but OpenAI actually is used in things like Microsoft Copilot, and those are the orange points there. And the DeepSeek AI, the Chinese open source or a freely available AI, which a Chinese company has made, is competing with the big players in Western tech companies, which is fascinating. So I'll not talk much about limitations here because it's so huge a topic, and I'll have Paul and perhaps our QA can answer some questions about that, so that I can make a bit more time for talking about responsible use of AI and AI ethics, because that's a massively important topic for us to all be aware of. These are the safety principles, which are an excellent starting point. There are other kind of responsible AI or AI ethics guidelines available, but I mention these because they're extremely detailed. The Turing Institute's AI Ethics and Governance in Good Practice program, excuse me, has a lot of detail and is very high quality in my opinion. So speaking very briefly about some of these, we start with sustainability. Now, it's been in the news quite a bit that training these massive AI models takes a huge amount of time and energy. They're becoming more efficient for the same level of performance, but it's a discussion that we need to have. And increasingly, I've seen that in public sector AI conversations, encouragingly. Of course, it's newly adopted technology and those conversations aren't mature yet, but we'll also have sustainability effects in terms of affecting employees in the wider job market and economy, potentially. I say that the Welsh Gov have done some work about workforce effects on workforce, working with unions on that kind of work, which is useful context for this conversation. So moving on to safety, I could talk about any one of these all day. So moving on to safety, that's about mitigating unhelpful or dangerous, poor responses from your AIs. There's the idea of accountability. If we remove humans from decisions, then if a human makes a bad call, we tend to hold them responsible. But if an AI makes a bad call, then who do we hold responsible? The answer to that is the designers and users of the system, ultimately, and the decision makers there. But it's something that needs to be thought about in this kind of thing. Fairness is a big one about, does AI equally give high quality service to everyone? We could be talking about equality in the sense of ethnicity and sex there, but it also applies to things like, especially in Wales, the digital divide and the Welsh language. Is it giving useful things to English language users and not Welsh language users? Explainability is a big one, because some of these AI machine learning things are so complicated that they can't readily be interpreted, which is a big problem if AI has made a huge decision about someone's life, something important like housing, benefits, and so on. So there's the question there: can we explain why it did what it did, and can we explain why we took it seriously especially when it's making big decisions like that? And data stewardship, so serious management of data and information governance, which I'll touch on again in a slide or two's time. So what does this look like? We've got, if you're planning to use AI professionally or personally, the advice would be to look into the best practice for responsible use of it. If relevant, if in a workplace or organization, make sure that your data protection, information governance, IT colleagues are on board before sharing any data with it. Especially tempting with generative AI to just ask it to do something, and that might involve sensitive data or personal data. But remember that is information sharing, and that data goes out to a private company, unless you've put things in place to safeguard that. Start from a use case is good advice, and figure out whether AI is the best job. Generally speaking, AI will support human decision making rather than replacing it. I think that's the easiest way of wording that. I recommend again the Government Digital Services Artificial Intelligence Playbook, which came out last month. Is a great resource for this, and there's a link to it later on in the slides. As a quick example of what can go wrong in these things, we've got an example from our own Copilot pilot, which I just had to include. So when my colleague was asking Copilot to write a description of some of our partner organizations and then of Data Cymru, we've got, for context, this office looks a little bit like our office. This is what it chose to give us. So good start. Data Cymru, the mystical keepers of data scrolls, the whisperers of spreadsheets, and navigators of statistical constellation. So what we can see here is that this is a masterpiece, and in all seriousness, is perhaps has some flaws. So what happened here was my colleague used the Welsh word gofod, referring to the Welsh voluntary sector event, and in an unrelated later question asked it to describe Data Cymru, and gofod is the Welsh word for space, translated into English. So it decided to give us a little bit of a cosmic taste to what it was doing. And this is obviously magnificent. I am, of course, a Gandalf of the data realm, and effective presentation is my spell book. But we're not guarding the celestial shelves of cosmic knowledge. So message here is to keep human intervention involved, maybe by careful reviewing of AI's work. This did not make the about us page of our website. But it's useful to note that asking multiple questions in a row in this particular AI led to some surprising results. So safeguards are important. In terms of responsible AI, for leading AI strategy, I haven't personally done that in a council, so I won't talk at length here. But again, to stress the importance of responsible AI, and to direct you towards some of the resources that are available, and communities, which I will mention at the end. Very briefly, kind of commenting again, I mentioned kind of information governance there, but regulation-wise, UK government in the pro-innovation approach to AI white paper there set out the intention for AI not to have dedicated regulators, but for existing ones existing regulators in high-risk areas to be empowered to react to the emergence of AI and AI affecting those areas. So GDPR certainly still applies wherever personal data is used, particularly in high-risk areas like automated decision-making, profiling, and things like that. So make sure you discuss with your data protection officer and any regulators relevant to your work. Very quickly, just to touch upon in-house versus procured. So just, really briefly to say that it's possible to procure a service like perhaps Microsoft Copilot or its alternatives, or procuring even, predictive analytics and machine learning, other machine learning things. But also AI might come with other software like your Microsoft Office or other tools, things like Photoshop, and other things perhaps that are specific to your service or directorate. And also AI can be built in-house by data scientists, developers, engineers. As I say, it's not all in the hands of massive corporations. You'll find examples of all of these in the case studies, which I mentioned at the end. And just to say, it's important to take this stuff seriously, responsible use of this stuff seriously, regardless of how you are using it. And there's a link to that playbook there. So that is basically the end of my part of this presentation. Really quickly before I hand over to Paul, the Centre for Digital Public Services in Wales have been putting together a load of resources and bringing together a community for the Welsh Public Sector AI community of practice. And also in partnership with Welsh Gov have put together a data science seminars to talk about the technical aspect of this. I don't have time to say anywhere near as much as I'd like to say about what's available, but there are some great resources here, guidance, networks, and libraries of use cases, as I say. So we at Data Cymru and WLGA colleagues look forward to continuing to support this work and yourselves. So I don't have time to talk about the myth busting that I mentioned at the start, but it's involved in my slides here. And time has come for me to hand over to Paul from Powys. Are you ready, Paul?
I am. Thanks, Rob. Brilliant. Well done.
Excellent.
You packed an awful lot in there. Let me just get my deck up. So,
yeah, as I say, Paul and I are both moving fast today. So if you missed things, our slides and the recording will be available. But certainly get in touch if there are outstanding questions. Go ahead, Paul.
Yeah, absolutely. As Rob says, this is a very information-dense presentation. I'm going to move through some of the slides very quickly. I want to try and leave 5 minutes for Q&A at the end if we can. The presentation is really good for quite a wide audience, from strategic leads, decision makers, governance folks, and technical practitioners. Rob's done a fantastic job introducing us to the fundamentals of AI considerations there, with a very sensible and justified emphasis on governance, risk management, and so on. I will talk about those a bit, but this is mostly going to be about practice and delivery and getting stuff done. This is a variation of a presentation that I've delivered a few times, most recently for a master's group actually at University of South Wales, and it covers who we are, what we do, how we do it, but I'm going to work through that quickly. But as Rob says, you're going to have the recording, you're going to have the slides. There's going to be some pause the video moments, shall we say. Okay, so Shemai everyone. Hello, good afternoon now. I'm Paul Fennell. I'm the Digital Development Manager at Powys County Council. And I have some pedigree, or vintage perhaps would be a better word. That's me, aged 11 in 19 1981, and that's some of my kind of background in computing there. You might recognize some of that hardware, some of you who are of a similar vintage. I had a bit of a checkered educational history, didn't do particularly well at school, didn't do particularly well at university. Had I done better, I would have wanted to go on and do a master's in AI at Edinburgh in the early 90s. That was my ambition. So I'm really happy that things have come to such a pass now later on in my career that I can actually get involved in stuff that I've always been interested in and motivated to work with. So a little bit more about some of my personal use later on in the slide deck. Very briefly, Powys, you're probably all aware, massive rural area, very sparse population, significant rurality challenges around transport, access to services, lack of economies of scale, etc. Net budget of the council, 342 million. We originally had a budget gap of 13.5 million predicted for the financial year ahead. We've got a balanced budget now, thanks to an 8.9% increase in council tax, a 3.2% settlement from the government, which was still below the national average of 4.3%. So the content of this slide deck is around our approach, how we're funded, how we're structured, how we deliver our programme, what processes we've got in place, what engagement activity we do. And I'm going to blat through all of that really quickly, because the bit you're probably most interested in is what have we actually done with AI and how have we done it? But some of the other stuff's in there in case it's of use and later reference for some of you. So our approach is basically centered around using a mix of cutting edge and tried and tested technologies to enhance services and improve the lives of our citizens. And we prioritize collaboration, agility, user-centric design, and so on to ensure that our solutions meet the needs of our users, both internally and externally. We've got secured funding from various sources to support our digital innovation initiative. We had a press release a while ago that announced 5 million over 3 years. Actually, in reality, we go and bid every year, and we've just been funded for the year ahead, and we don't know what will happen in the year after that. But we're in a relatively fortunate position compared to some of our peers. And really the strength behind that, or the reason behind that, is because we focus on using in-house resources and growing and developing our staff skills, rather than having contracts with consultants and external enablers. So our team is structured as follows. We've got 7 project managers, a digital access manager, 4 business analysts in a change and improvement team, myself, and 10 developers and integrators. So a pretty big team by any mark across the public sector. But as I say, that's because we really don't spend anything on external development. So the program's structured around several different aspects. Major solutions renewal. We're looking at 5 major solutions being renewed over the current period, the kind of planning side. But then of more relevance to today's session, the initiatives around AI and innovation and technology integration and so on. We have a program of around 65 projects on our books at the moment. So although we're a big team, we're very busy. I think 45 of them are live and the rest are queued and prioritized. And we have an ever-increasing list of things to work on, partly because of the success of our outreach, which I'm going to talk about in a bit more detail shortly. Very information-rich slide here. This is a pause the video moment or look back at the slide deck later moment. There's no way I've got time to talk through all of this in detail. But basically, in summary, it's my attempt to capture our entire digital innovation process in one slide. And it might be a useful reference point for some of you later on. We're quite Microsoft-centric, as you can see from this, but we do use other tooling as well. We use quite a lot of open source technology, particularly around spatial data and so on. And it's really about whatever fits. But because we have Microsoft E5 licensing across our estate, we try and get as much value from that as we can from the Microsoft 365 platform. And that naturally leads us into things like Power Platform and Azure and so on, which takes us on to DevOps. We're also fortunate to have a very strong in-house BI team. I think a couple of them are on the call today. They do fantastic work, and the development and integration team work closely with them on making sure that we surface the insights and learning from the solutions that we build, and increasingly make use of AI in doing that as well. So I've been doing a lot of engagement work around AI, partly because we realized we had a bit of a weakness around engaging with our services internally to explain to them what we could be doing. They didn't know what they didn't know. They didn't know that they could have what they didn't know about, and so on. And the answer to that, I felt, was really to go shoving my foot in the door and going in and having conversations with everybody. And that started with talking to senior leadership, corporate leadership team, all of the senior management teams for the services, and getting into the operational management teams as well. So I've probably done over 100 meetings internally and externally now around this stuff, and realistically reached probably about 1,000 staff and around about 1,000 external people as well. I need to update the figures there. And really what I do there is start off just by talking about Copilot and getting people hands-on with Copilot, because Copilot comes with that Microsoft licensing, and it has the data sovereignty considerations around data processing and data risk management dealt with within your tenancy, within your security oversight and your administrative controls from the perspective of your technical teams if you're a Microsoft customer. There are other ways of achieving the same thing with Google and with Amazon Web Services and so on. Of course, Microsoft isn't the only game in town, but Copilot is that natural point of entry because people can use it with that reassurance of governance and control around it. So when I go and do these sessions, I start off by talking to them about that and getting them hands-on with it early on as well, as a kind of icebreaker. And because the first time you use generative AI, it's a bit of a jaw-dropping moment. It's a demystifying moment, and you get quite a bubble of energy and enthusiasm around the room. I did a presentation to 200 education staff at the Royal Welsh Showground before Christmas. After a couple of minutes, and they were starting to glaze over, I got them hands-on with Copilot. And they were asking about personal education plans and learning and so on. But they're also asking all kinds of amusing and inappropriate questions like, how do I leave my boyfriend and goodness knows what? So that just created this big kind of bubble of energy in the room and allowed us to snowball that into more discussion about what AI means for education, both at frontline delivery within secondary school particularly and tertiary, but also what it means as an education support service within the council. And that kind of approach has just been rolled out across lots of different service engagements, really. So how do I go about that? Well, really, I break it down into 3 tiers. We talk about the beginner entry points around Copilot, freely available in Windows and Edge, or ChatGPT for personal use for free, bearing in mind Rob's caveats about don't give it work data, because if you're using ChatGPT free and you're not provisioning it yourself within your tenancy, that data is going off to the US data centers and to OpenAI and so on. So Copilot, more or less safe for work as long as you're covered by existing privacy notices and data processing agreements and so on, whereas ChatGPT more around personal use. In either case, though, really good for building initial understanding and confidence, getting familiarity with prompting, suitable for general personal assistance, whether at work or what am I going to cook this evening, or how do I prepare for giving a speech at my son's wedding in June, which I've got to do, and so on and so forth. Suitable for anyone to get hands-on with and free to use. And then at an intermediate level, we've got solutions like Copilot 365 and some of the portals that we've been building using underlying Azure OpenAI technology, which I'll talk about in more detail shortly. Relatively inexpensive compared to the benefits one can get from them. So Copilot 365, $30 per user per month, and can be really transformatory for knowledge workers who have busy inboxes, a lot going on in their Microsoft 365 applications like Word, Excel, Outlook, Teams, etc. And you can get really significant gains in personal productivity. There are several different ways of achieving those things. There's also Teams Premium, which is more affordable than Copilot 365, which does the meeting transcript into AI note summary, etc. And some of the stuff we've built, again, I'll show shortly. Then at an advanced level, we've got custom solutions where we're building quite complex, bigger things that I'll do a bit of a deeper dive on, which can really help achieve strategic transformation across services for the way we deliver for the public. Those can be delivered internally by our development team, or they can be delivered externally by other partners or in partnership as a mix, as a hybrid. And they're really at a business process level, not a kind of individual or team level. And they come down to full-blown business case and return on investment analysis and so on. So that's the way I kind of pitch and explain the different technologies at different tiers. And then in terms of how we present all of this to the staff and help upskill and drive awareness and manage the governance and responsibility and ethics and so on, we have a SharePoint hub site for AI, which covers all the topics that you can see in the top nav there, including some of the stuff that Rob's been talking about today, a short history around AI and some instructional stuff, some case studies and so on. But really importantly, the policy, governance, guidance, standards and external references that people need in order to start exploring this area confidently and engage with us. And in particular, the way we present the kind of AI principles is via this kind of 4-axis diagram, guiding principles that are paired up around fairness and inclusivity, privacy and security, reliability and safety, and transparency and accountability. And this is really building on the work of the likes of the Turing Institute that Rob mentioned, the ICO, UK government, Welsh government, and so on, CDPS's recent practice guides, so on and so forth. So there's loads of great information out there. What you can't do is just grab it and implement it and tick a box. You've got to go through the process of thinking about it, engaging internally with your leadership, with your staff, finding your digital champions, your AI champions, bringing your governance groups together. Just the same as you can't take a data privacy impact assessment for a project and just say, we'll pinch that one from Newport or Cardiff and apply it here and tick a box. You've actually got to go through the process of thinking about it and engaging in order to get the change that you need within the organization, get the assurance that you need as well. So what have we done with all of this? Well, we've built at tier 1, the most complex stuff. We've built a case management solution wrapped around Microsoft Azure Translator for our Welsh in-house translation team to manage a very large workload around translation for across the council. I'm going to dive into the architecture for that in a bit more detail shortly. And we've also built a retrieval augmented generation solution for education transformation consultations. So we've got a 10-year, £300 million programme running for changing the way education's delivered across the council. We have to do a lot of public engagement around that. We get an awful lot of representations back, as you can imagine, and we have a lot of processing to do around that information. But often that information is very similar in nature, depending on what is coming back, what particular thing is being talked about. That it'll be similar to what's been run previously. So we have a system which basically breaks down the issues, thematically analyzes them, chunks them up, and then gives them to an editorial team for human in the loop editorial review and safety checking and sense checking. And in future, we're hoping it's also going to start suggesting some of the responses the council might choose to make to some of the issues raised based on the ones that we've made previously to similar issues when they've been raised. And then we've got a whole other load of a raft of different solutions that we've built, which I would characterize as few-shot or multi-shot prompt engineering layered behind user-facing forms that's calling OpenAI large language models in Azure, again, within our data sovereignty, hosted in UK data centers, no data going outside of our control. And those solutions are relatively quick and easy to build and relatively inexpensive to run as well, provided you've got some in-house development skills. And I'm going to talk a little bit about some of those in a bit more detail. And then we've got our use of trial of AI coding tools under the GDS's AI coding assistant trial that's been run recently. So we've been trialing GitHub to assist our developers, GitHub Copilot, AI Hub that I've mentioned, quite a lot of training being rolled out, both by myself, kind of leading on the engagement, but then we've got a couple of digital skills trainers who are rolling out principally Copilot training across the organization. The major solution stuff that we're partnering with others on. So we're in the middle of a trial of Beam's Magic Notes in social care, which is really exciting. Some really solid positive indicators coming back around that work, which I'll touch on a bit more detail. And we're looking at IEG4's AI validator for planning, which looks like quite a mature and attractive solution as well. So there are some companies starting to produce some pretty convincing solutions. We're not about reinventing what's already out there and already being done. But where something doesn't exist, or where we can do it more affordably or more flexibly, then we've got the capability in-house with some quite experienced developers to be able to build some of this stuff as well. And then a personal area of interest for me is around digital inclusion and the role of AI in support of neurodiverse individuals in education. So I'm working with high schools around developing some work and engagement around that, and just around EDI and disability and so on. So what have we built? This is our GOS ICM front end, which is JavaScript based, and at the back end is your OpenAI GPT-4o Mini. And we've got tools to outline documents, engage with an HR chatbot around our policy base and our guidance, write job description and person specifications to the council standard, go straight from natural language to process diagrams, rewrite for a particular reading age, summarize transcripts in one of 10 different template styles now. So you just upload the VTT file that you can download from a Teams transcript, and it will basically do what Copilot 365 or Teams Premium can do for you. But we've got one there, for example, that does supervisions for social care. And we can tune those up quite quickly for different use cases. And then we've got a link to our translation request. We're also doing multilingual translation outside of Welsh, on a self-service basis, which has been approved by our legal team, on a trial basis with some caveats attached, and that's being used quite widely by children's services already, with some significant savings around that. So those are some of our mid-tier tools. This is a deeper dive on the architecture for Welsh translation. I'm not going to step us through this. It's there as a reference if you want to dig into it. We're working with WLGA and some external consultants to write this up really as an accelerator that can be picked up by others if they want to pick up on our work. And we're also partnering with Bangor University's Welsh team on making sure that we do some good solid evaluation around this, and that we compare the performance of Azure Translator with other machine translation resources. Similarly, this is the architecture around the education consultation response analysis. It's a retrieval augmented generation solution. We dump a whole load of data into SharePoint. It gets ingested into a vector database, a semantic index in Azure. That's used by a couple of bots, and it's also used by Power Automate to extract that issues data and group it thematically and so on and so forth. And then we post it back into a SharePoint list, and then we push it back into a document template by restructuring Word XML, which is a bit janky and a bit complex, but it works. And then the editorial team can review all of that and work with it. Appreciate quite a lot of depth in that, and I'm moving very fast, but it's there for later reference if of interest. This is some of the behind the scenes prompt engineering that's going on in that solution via Power Automate. I'd probably say don't try this at home. Use Azure Functions or Prompt Flow in AI Studio. Power Automate's not really the right thing to do it in. We went there because we had experience in Power Automate more than those other two at the time, but in retrospect, I would recommend one of those other two. More along the lines of pure data science and machine learning stuff, here's a BERT classifier against all the categories in our IT help desk ticketing system. We found our users didn't really like the way we were categorizing and subcategorizing or asking them to do it, and found it quite janky. So one of our developers built a custom BERT classifier for doing it, which initially came out with a load of rubbish, but actually got really good once we chopped off that long tail of misleading information, basically. This is how our text to diagram piece works. You just give it a prompt and it can come back with multiple different diagram types. It just goes off and makes an API call to something that renders a scalable vector graphics file, which can be downloaded. So that's an example of a kind of process flow. It'll do sequence diagrams, it'll do mind maps, does all kinds of different things. And if you don't know what type of diagram is suitable for the use case you've got, it'll tell you, it'll suggest based on making a call to the large language model. Because that's what large language models are good at, analyzing language, unsurprisingly. A lot of people using large language models for things they're not particularly good at, I would say, at the moment. But from the point of view of you guys as data analysts, data scientists, etc., one of the things I've heard it used for that it is particularly good at is how are you going to label up your categorization when you're classifying things down and chunking your data up and categorizing it? Let's say you've got really large data sets with hundreds of categories in it. trying to get good 2 or 3 word names for all of those categories to start labeling everything properly can be quite challenging. LLMs are really good at that type of thing. Beam Magic Notes, really exciting solution, really interesting company. Basically frontline practitioners in social care using it to support their work. We're getting some incredible feedback from them about not just the quality and time saving and so on, but the effect it's having on them as individuals, their confidence, their well-being, their mental health and so on and so forth, and solid feedback from service users as well. And it's really interesting that we're putting AI directly in front of quite vulnerable service users. And I was just on a call about digital inclusion. This to me is also a point of entry to conversations with those people about digital inclusion and confidence in using technology and how they feel about AI and so on. So, you know, we can start bringing together different threads here around these types of projects. Loads of really lovely qualitative anecdotal feedback there for you to explore later when you can look through the slides. But from a purely quantitative point of view, potential ROI there in excess of 3,000%. We're talking investment. If we scale this to 415 users, around 100,000 a year, roughly speaking. And in terms of cashable and non-cashable savings, we're looking at probably 4 million or thereabouts. So, you know, really, really attractive just from hard numbers point of view. Bit of stuff around lessons learned. Culture is the biggest barrier. So get in there, have these conversations, use that engagement to drive people's interest, which then creates their motivation and appetite to actually change and get engaged with digital conversations. What I'm finding is that talking about AI is unpacking conversations about automation and development and all kinds of other things that were much harder to have before AI came along and captured everyone's imagination. So my personal experience around using all of this, I've been using ChatGPT Plus for a couple of years in support of my work and personally. And I find it enormously helpful. I'm also a Copilot 365 user, perhaps slightly less helpful, although it does have the safety boundaries of being within the work environment. But just because it's slightly detuned and I'm just used to using ChatGPT, it's still a very good, solid product that's got a hell of a lot of use for a lot of people. And I've gained a lot of insights into solutions to personal productivity, to my working environment, and to also the way I think and work and so on. An example of how I use it for personal productivity, of course, we all have transcripts on and we're used to seeing AI notes from calls now. I will feed those notes and some other supporting template documentation into generative AI, and I will get project proposals, business cases, options papers, architecture summaries, product requirement definitions, technical and non-technical briefings, etc. All of them back in minutes, distilling several days worth of work down to half an hour to an hour, really. And so that's just one example of kind of my personal workflow around use of AI. I got curious about what I was doing with all of this and what it looked like. So I used AI to help me write some Python to create a knowledge graph of my own use of ChatGPT. This is a knowledge graph of all of my chats with ChatGPT over the course of a couple of years. And I've just arbitrarily coded it up to different topics there, Azure, education, social care, etc. To help me explore my own second brain, if you like. I didn't write the knowledge graph, that was done by Obsidian, but GPT and I wrote the Python to do the semantic analysis, and you can see the parameters along the side there of how that's controlled and how flexible that script is to do that type of analysis. Did it partly for my own entertainment as kind of an evening project, but it's something that could be scaled to any corpus of markdown notes or data really, and turned into a knowledge graph. Conscious that we need to allow a bit of time. So just to say, I think AI is a fantastic partner around helping you cognitively offload and step up in terms of what you're doing and how you're thinking. Yes, you need to approach it with a degree of skepticism. You need to understand it. But the more you use it and the more you get into it, the better you get at using it, the better you get at reflecting on your own mental processes, your own thoughts, structuring your own requests better. It's hyperdimensional space, basically. And if you go into it asking smart questions, you get smart stuff back out of it. If you ask simple questions, you get simple stuff back out of it. This is there for later reference. Fantastic insights, particularly for data scientists and data analysts, from a guy called Leland McInnes, who wrote some really useful libraries that you're going to want to use around all of this stuff. This was all gleaned yesterday from this podcast that I ran across. Some links to some useful resources for future learning there. Microsoft Azure, Microsoft Learn, podcasts, YouTube channels, etc. And a shameless plug as a proud dad for my lad Arthur, who's out in California as a data science researcher for UCLA Health. He's been involved in producing a Python library called Model Tuner. There's a link to that there. It might be useful for some of you wanting to get into the nitty-gritty around all of this stuff. So there we are. We got 3 minutes for questions. Diolch and Val, thank you very much, everybody. My closing message is that we're lucky enough to live in a time where we find ourselves in roles that we can get huge satisfaction and enjoyment from using this explosion in technical capability to have a positive effect for people, nature, and the planet. That's not overplaying it. I've been around since before the web was invented. This is much bigger than that. Thank you all.
Oh, thank you both. That's fantastic, and I'm loving seeing the hand claps as well, because yeah, that's pretty special. So I think it resonated and went down really, really well. What I will say is that if there are any questions, I think that there is a hand up somewhere, but what I would say is that we take the questions through the chat instead. So we've probably got time for about one question. There are none yet. I think everybody was so enamored by what they were listening to that they haven't yet posed a question. If there are any questions and you want them answered now, then quickly get into the chat. But I am conscious of time, and we do finish at 1. So if there are more questions that come through, then we've got time for, Rob has agreed to kind of funnel through them and work out which ones to respond to, and we'll liaise with Paul on that as well. So there's a question saying, are you open to us making contact from you to get some specific advice? And I guess that goes for both of you. Were we happy for people to get directly in touch? I'm putting you both on the spot there, obviously. I know that I'm going to speak for Rob now and say Rob absolutely is. His job. Paul?
Yeah, sure. It may take me a little while to get back to you. And just to share, I am starting up, been asked to chair an AI practitioners subgroup for WLGA DAG, which is getting going shortly. So if you're interested in more of the kind of practice elements and technological elements, get involved in that group. Reach out to Matthew Evans, and do sign up and share what you're doing as well, because that's what that group's all about, is co-learning. Thank you.
Absolutely, and Rob, that's probably worth just touching again on the data science networks that you've referenced in your
yes,
presentation as well.
the slides that you'll be sent, you have links for some amazing resources. And everyone, get in touch with me if there's anything that you were hoping to get out of today and didn't, because I'd be really interested to hear about them.
Okay, and there is a question there about AI policies. Oops, it's gone. AI policies and procedures. Are them, and I think this is for Paul, do you have written down AI policies and procedures that you share with your staff? Yeah,
we do. We're kind of more at the kind of practice guides and general awareness raising, etc. We don't have our governance group formed yet, and we don't have a strategy. But I'm kind of in line with Dr. Laura Gilbert from the AI incubator, the UK Gov AI lead. Basically, this is ubiquitous. It's going to be everywhere. It's going to be in everything. And you need to govern it under your existing mechanisms. Your information compliance people need to be up to speed. Your security people need to be up to speed, and so on and so forth. Don't treat it as something separate and to the side, because there's more risks in that, I think, than making it just ubiquitous and generally known to everybody.
Absolutely. Well, it's 1 o'clock, so all that remains for me to say is thank you very much both. That was fantastic. There's a lot of love in the chats there for you both. We'll stop the recording, and just to say